Hello, hello, hello. I'm here with my lovely guest, Alex.
Hello.
We had him here already.
Glad to be back.
The honorable evangelist, apologetic teacher of the generation, sitting right in front of me.
That's a pretty big statement.
Yeah, it needs to be we need a longer title for you. Can we get some longer titles in the comments, please? Bro, it's been 3 weeks. Wow. And I know I only gave you 30 minutes last time, so I know you want more. So we're going to go extra long for you.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm excited.
And so last week we talked, like 3 episodes, I think we talked about like simple apologetic points, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we even did like a pretend little conversation.
Yeah, that was like an off the cuff thing.
Yep. Wasn't staged.
I liked it.
So you weren't ready for that.
Oh, you have to be always ready for that.
But you weren't ready for it, but you were ready for it.
It was off script. Yeah.
It was off script. Yeah. And so I know there were we talked a couple times on the phone. So I know there are a couple things that you want to talk about.
Yeah.
I think of those points, we wanted to talk about honoring in conversation. We wanted like how to approach a conversation. But I think like before any of those points, I think we wanted to talk about your process going through apologetics and teaching and having like respectful, loving, good quality conversations with people.
Yeah. That's also I'd love to share on that. So how I got into this whole thing at all was actually walking away from my faith. And I used to think that Christianity, as a general rule, wasn't for smart people. And so I got that idea because when I would ask questions, I would get really bad answers. You know, there's a atheist philosopher who once said that it's better to have questions that aren't able to be answered than have answers that aren't able to be questioned. And I felt that from a struggling Christian perspective. And so when people wouldn't engage in something that we call apologetics, it would actually weaken my faith more and more until eventually I decided, you know what, this is not for people who actually care about answering the questions that matter most. And so in my opinion, growing up in a Christian household, I came to the conclusion that if I were to choose a worldview, Christianity would not be one of them because it doesn't have good answers to the questions that are the most relevant for the person. And so I ended up basically becoming a naturalistic, skeptical, agnostic, kind of a mix of everything, mostly skeptical, bordering atheism. And so, and I'd love to touch on why naturalism fails later if we have time, but it does. And so eventually I ended up coming back.
You might have to tell people what that means first.
So sorry. Yes. So naturalism is a worldview in which
so just jump over words.
Yeah,
here.
my bad. It's a worldview in which you believe that everything can be explained through natural processes. So there is no such thing as the soul. There's no supernatural. There's no spiritual. None of that exists. Mm-hmm. Everything that exists can be explained through physical stuff that you can feel, touch, see, observe. Basically, the scientific method on steroids. And so that's kind of where I was, and I thought that was the most logical position to hold in our world and in our universe. Yeah. So basically, I learned over time that actually Christianity does have the most vigorous and corresponding answers to life's toughest and most profound questions. And now I look back and I see it was actually God drawing me back. But when something becomes the most important thing in your life, you know, C.S. Lewis once said that if Christianity is true, it's of infinite importance. And if it's not true, it's not important at all. And so we're all in this boat together, no matter what you believe or what you think you believe. We're all in a boat of like trying to figure out what best explains reality. And so for me, that was the most important thing in my life, because as I walked away from God, I basically came to the conclusion that like, hey, if I'm going to live the rest of my life as if there's no God, I better be pretty darn sure he's not there, you know? And so I actually approached studying pretty vigorously for a while. As a naturalist, I approached just various arguments for the existence of God. Is it reasonable at all to believe in God's existence at all? Like, is that just something that I have to throw my mind away for? And then eventually I got into a place of, you know, there's many steps I can go into, but just to save some time, I ended up coming to the conclusion that it is more probable that there is a God. And if this God exists, it is most probable that it's Jesus. And so that's when the journey really started to hit the road. And so for me, like sometimes people ask me how I remember things in apologetics, because generally, like, I mean, I needed the address for this place. I've been here like 2-3 times, you know, like, but for some reason, like with things when it comes to talking about apologetics or just one-on-one evangelistic type conversations, like it's always like there. It's, you know, it's ready. And, you know, when something becomes the most important thing in your life for a matter of a few years, like then you will know, and especially if it's a gift. And I think the Holy Spirit, it has grace over this area for me.
Yeah. What do you think about coming into a conversation with the motivation, or like you have to lean back. If you think you had to have like the motivation to like approach a conversation, like I'm going to be evangelic, I'm going to share the message of Jesus, or like you just make these switches in the way you have your conversations, and like you're approaching it with that objective of apologetics, evangelism, or like, well, this conversation, I'm going to kind of just have a normal conversation, and maybe I'm going to try and avoid that. Like kind of how we try to avoid politics sometimes in a conversation, because we want to respect a person, or we want to be like, well, I just really don't feel like I want to have that conversation right now. How should we approach it? Like in a normal setting where it's like not weird, or doesn't feel like we're stepping. Like you understand what I'm saying. It's a hard question to sum up.
No, that is the question.
Yeah, exactly. It's the question. It's like literally, it's the thing we ask ourselves all the time. Like, it's the reason why I think we have a lot of problems, or it's the big argument. Like, we should be out there sharing, or we should defend our faith, or when shouldn't we, or you know what I mean?
Yeah. You know, like, I love that question, because it really gets down to the point of like, how do we have these conversations and not be awkward with people, right? Or like, how do we have these conversations and like not seem like, hey, listen, we're trying to convert you, so let me convince you real quick. So I get all that, and I've like, for me, it just becomes part of the way that you communicate kind of who you are, because what you believe about God oftentimes tells me more than I need to know about who you are or who you eventually will become. Because the thing is, what you believe about God says a lot about you. And so what you believe about your worldview also says a lot about you. And so for me, like sometimes, actually most of the time, my favorite way, and this isn't like the way to do it, but my favorite way to do apologetics is a lot of times people don't even know what I believe until we're halfway into the conversation. And by then they're already like, okay, like I see what, you know, like by then it's too late. Like I already have your interest, you know? And so a lot of times I'll find like an example. I used to work with a guy who was studying astronomy. So he's a full-time student and he was studying astronomy, and I had some shifts with him and at a job I used to work at. And I would talk to him from the perspective of what he was studying. And so I would ask him, you know, like, for example, hey, like, is it true that like before the Big Bang, like what, like the time had a beginning, right? So time, space, and matter had a beginning at one point in the singularity. He's like, yeah, we're studying this now. Like, yeah, it is actually. And I'm like, oh, cool. What do you think happened before then? He's like, you know what? Nobody really knows. But you guys see what I'm getting at already. And so I'm like, yeah, so it's interesting, because that means that if it's outside of natural stuff, could we call it like, I don't know, supernatural? Like, you know, like you do that slowly, or things like that. Like, I think if we're ourselves and we genuinely find interest in the people that we're talking to, and more than just like some kind of project to convert, but rather like this person has like, this person, first of all, was created in the image of God. He deserves, or she deserves respect, right? And so if we approach the conversation with the right motive, and there's a way to actually make ourselves be interested in certain things because we pay attention. You know what I mean? And so if we ask the right questions, people tend to love to answer questions, especially if it's about something they're interested in, you know? And so if we approach the conversation in a way that asks questions with respect, and then we hear them out, meaning we let them finish their sentences, we don't just think about how we are to respond, but we actually think about what they're saying in order to both, A, you know, have them feel heard, and B, get information about what they believe so that we can respond to it better. And we see Paul do this in Acts 17 when he comes to the Areopagus, where the Greeks were basically like, it was their job to just think about new ideas and hear new ideas. That was like their whole career. And he shows up, and instead of, like in other places, he just healed people. Like here he shows up and he sees that they have an altar to an unknown God. And he's like, hey guys, and he quotes their poetry to them. He quotes Meander to them. And then he continues to just talk to them about God, and like that was his approach. And so like sometimes we see the interests of people and we see what they're passionate about, and we can literally just be interested in the person.
It's more of a relational thing than a logical thing.
Yeah.
I love that we're talking about this from the beginning about communication, because in the Slavic community, I feel like this is a huge thing. Because for me also growing up, it's always kind of been like, why do I got to go to church? And it's like, shut up and just come with us, for like that communication aspect. Like it's just kind of this like aggressive, like, because I said so. Why do we have to read the Bible? Why is it true? Because it is. And it's always been kind of like this blind faith kind of thing for most, I would say, Slavic people. It's just, because my parents made me come, I'm going. And you don't understand the actual practical side of things. And it's funny because I remember the Bible was always this, super spiritual book that we just believe because we have to, because there is God, but we don't know the whys. And actually, I remember when you were teaching us during Bible school, it like hit me at one point, because so many preachers, they talk about the Bible isn't just, some history book. It's alive. It's real. But they'd actually hit me. I was like, wait, the Bible is actually a history book. Like for me, it was actually the other way around. I looked at it so spiritually because I never got those practical answers. But when it was finally like, hey, it's actually like historical, this actually happened. Like there's evidence that backs it up. There's actually, because you talk to so many people, even like during evangelism, like you try to talk to them from the Bible and they're like, I don't believe the Bible. And now you can't, talk to them from the Bible because they don't believe it. But then you go on and you learn it a little bit and you realize that the Bible is actually the most credible book. Right? So that communication aspect, it really, you really grow in that. Hey, I love how you said that, Apostle Paul, it's more of a relational thing where you connect with the people, you figure out, okay, if they don't believe the Bible, let me come at them with, with what they're into.
Yeah, dude, I love what you just said. It so it reminds me of some things, with the Slavic community in particular, and I think a lot of communities that have come out of countries where persecution was a thing in general. Like what I've noticed is there seems to be this gap between the older generation and the youth, and the thing is, for the older generation, like my parents, maybe your parents, like their concern wasn't so much as how can we trust the Bible's historical reliability. Their concern was, how do we not get arrested for owning one? And so that's what they were, that was their life. And so when we come here, we have Bibles everywhere, and we have, preachers everywhere. We have like a platter of churches to choose from. Like we do whatever we want, and so for us, we're not worried about going to prison for owning a Bible. We're worrying about, what about Buddhism? What about atheism? What about the Muslims? They have a book too, and so that's kind of what our questions are. And so what I noticed was, particularly in these kinds of communities, the lack of apologetics is deafening. The lack of like people being able to engage on a level of the mind, loving God with your whole mind and loving his truths and being able to defend them, like in 1 Peter 3:15 and making the most of every opportunity, like that seems to be a little bit lacking. And I really want to see that change, because eventually that will equip the youth of the next generation to go out and be themselves, really, to represent the worldview that they believe is the right worldview.
I think it's really important too to highlight the fact that it was Paul, right, who said defend your faith. Yeah. And the word...
Oh, that was Peter.
Peter, sorry.
Oh, Paul did it in different ways.
Okay. Yeah. Well, Peter, defend it's a very like specific word, because when you defend something, typically you're more reserved. You're not going to be really aggressive. You're going to be protective of what you have, and you're going to approach something very safely. Because you're on the defensive. And so I think a lot of times, even as specifically me personally, right, I'll come out aggressive, or you'll come out almost out of a reaction. And usually when you really believe something, it doesn't require your emotions to come out that way. usually you can be calm and collected. And I found that the most productive conversations are the ones where it's calm, it's collected, it's respectful, it's honoring.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the process of becoming an apologetic, which we all are, because we're all called to defend our faith.
Yeah.
In a respectful and peaceful manner.
Yeah.
Because when you defend something, you're not the one attacking. You know, you're the one just giving a reason why someone should believe this or why I believe this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And then I think like the evidence of that is shown through our actions. It's shown through our life. It's even shown through how we had the conversation with the person.
Yeah. Perfect. Yes. So like in the for example, even in the verse that people go to, like the 2 Peter 3:15, it literally tells you to be ready, to defend the faith, and then it says to anyone who asks, right? And so people are expected to see our lifestyle or our life or our demeanor, whatever it is, and they're kind of expected to be like, "What's up with you?" Like to ask like, "Why are you so happy?" or something like that, And then like we see Peter actually model this in the day of Pentecost, like when the Spirit came down. And all sorts of stuff started breaking out. People were like, they're drunk. Like something's up here, and some people were like, wait, they're speaking in my language. Like all sorts of stuff is going on. Peter gets up and he's like, let me give you guys an apologia, an apologetic and defense. And so because they're already like trying to figure out what's going on. And so here he is and he presents the gospel to them. And to kind of piggyback off of what you said earlier about the historicity of the Bible, like for them, like this was the thing, like the historical, like the tomb is empty was the grounding point for Christianity,
It was
and
so fresh for them too.
Yeah. And so like studying, so like there's even this divide within scholarship, within Christian scholarship, even among whether or not we should study the historical Jesus or if we should stick to the Bible. And it's like, well, the Bible is the historical Jesus, like it's the same thing, And so like for them, like even Peter went through from a person who denied Christ 3 times. He was like too scared to like admit that he was with him, to a guy who was boldly defending, and he was literally saying, whom you crucified. Like when he was talking to the Jews, he's like, this Jesus whom you like this is this, like we have to see the transformation here, and like he went from a guy who was too scared to say, I hung out with Jesus, to like, actually you did this to him and he rose from the dead and we're witnesses of this.
Wow.
Because of the historical resurrection, so the historicity was the big part and still is today. Yeah.
I love, somebody shared actually how, because it was so fresh for them, when they would partake in communion for the first even a couple hundred years, they would take communion and it was such a common thing for them all to be healed.
Wow.
Right. Because it was still so fresh to them. Like this just happened. It's so real.
Yeah.
And now thousands of years later, it's kind of like you really need to communicate with people. You need to really get the point across. You need to build their faith, give them testimony, something where like, guys, this is still real today.
Yeah.
This is still real. And just what are some ways, I guess, what are some key ways that you, let's say, relationally were able to reach some people? Because I remember watching your Instagram where you're like looking out for like Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses out your window. You're like scoping out.
I remember that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching that. So what are some ways that you kind of like were able to draw them in or even relate to them, be able to like communicate with them and just kind of in a practical way?
Yeah. That was really cool. They were so nice. So I'm gonna tell a story. So these 2 Mormons, they show up at my door, and they open the door, I open the door. I'm like, hey, and I kind of already knew what was about to happen, and so they were like, hey, I'll wear this and this and this, and so with them, I was upfront. I'm like, guys, honestly, I respect what you do, honestly, because if you believe what you believe and you're doing what you're doing, that is a logical like thing. Like you should care, you know what I mean? And so the fact that you're here demonstrates that you care. So I respect what you're doing. Like you hear them out, and you're like, yeah, like honestly, like you tell them how you feel. And I'm like, honestly, guys, I'm a Protestant and I have different beliefs than you, but I used to be a naturalist, a skeptic, and I'm here. And so I'm always open to learn. And so how about you guys come over and we'll talk. I want to hear you guys out, see what you believe, see if there's maybe similarities here, see if there's differences, kind of dive into what the differences are. And of course they're not going to say no, like they're excited because someone wants to hear their testimony, and they should be, and so they started coming over. I think this went on for probably about 6 months, and it was pretty much every Tuesday night. and they would come over and we would talk, and they would give me sermons to watch, and I would watch them, and I would bring those sermons up next time they were over, and I would tell them what I liked about the sermons and what I didn't like about the sermon. They gave me the Book of Mormon, and I pointed some things out in the Book of Mormon that I thought disagreed with the Bible, and this went on for a while. And during this time, I think it was about 6 months, but I might be a little bit off there. But during this time, there were times where I'm praying, I think basically like before and after before they come, like, Spirit, like, prepare me for this, like whatever's going to happen, give me wisdom. And then afterwards I'd pray for them as well. And actually the church that when they're on missions, they get moved around. And so he's from a different state, but he was staying in Camas. And there's a Mormon church in Camas, and I would drive by it every day on the way to work. And every time I see it, it would remind me to pray for him. And so I would pray for him. After a while of these conversations, sometimes it starts to feel like you're not getting through to them. You're thinking like, what, like, you feel like you're bringing such convincing things, and you're praying, you're doing all the right things, like you're being respectful. Like they would come over, I would sit them down. My wife would sometimes she cut up fruit for them, or like we'd always have LaCroix on the table, and you're like, what is going wrong here? Like, how come, sometimes you start to think that like it's not working, but really we have no idea what, we have an idea, we should, but like we don't always know exactly what the Spirit is doing on the background, So we are called to be respectful, to be courteous, and to really represent grace and truth with that balance. So after a while, they kind of just stopped coming. I forgot what happened. I think things got in the way. It was like a mutual, like, oh, I can't make it. And then I didn't talk to him for a few months. I think it was. I should have probably got my timelines better on this one, but I think it was about a few months. So he kind of just fell off the map. And then I had like this urge to reach out to him, for a day. I kind of ignored it the first day. I think I just kind of prayed for him a little bit. And then the urge just like wouldn't go away. So I'm like, okay. So I texted him like, hey, what's up, man? Like, I won't mention his name, but I'm like, what's up, man? Like, it's been a while. I missed your conversations, and I can say that honestly because I'm like, where'd you go? And so like, I missed your conversations. Like they were really cool. Like, what do you guys think about coming over again? And it would usually be that one guy, but sometimes his partner would switch up a little bit. And so he responds with like, what would be the point of that? And so I'm here thinking like, well, and I'm like, honestly, like, I don't see myself getting convinced, but like something along these lines, like, but like, I honestly like to learn from you. And I want to see like, maybe one of us could, I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was like an honest response without like hiding the fact that like, I actually care for your salvation, like it was like one of those. And he agreed to meet up. So it's been a few months. So I'm like, ooh, what's going on here? But I felt like I needed to reach out to him. And so we meet up at a Thai restaurant in downtown Camas. And actually, before we meet up, he tells me what's going on. So I think it was the next day. So we agreed to meet up. And then a day or two later, he sends me a really long text. I think I was like at a dinner table somewhere. And he sends me a really long text or Facebook message or whatever. And he's like basically telling me that he's an atheist. And he's still on his missions. He's still on his Mormon missions. Like if his church found out about this, like there's a good reason I'm not saying his name. Like that's a big deal. And so he's basically telling me, yeah, I'm an atheist. Like I don't think there can't be actual evidence for God. Like, and he just like pours out his heart to me, like out of nowhere, right? Like this there was never a glimpse of this in their evangelisms. And we met for a while. I've never seen this, So sometimes people are hiding things inside. And even if God is drawing them, they won't reveal it because they're on a mission. You know what I mean? Like, and so we meet up at a Thai restaurant, and I told him right away, I'm like, hey, listen, man, like, I know you have to be with your partner. Like they always send him out in twos and stuff, and they live together, I think. And I'm like, yeah, I know you have to be with him. So if there's something you don't want me to say, like that will, get you in trouble with your church, let me know. And he's like, it's fine. It's all good. So we meet up. And him and I just start talking, like back and forth. We just talk. And he has all these questions and all of this stuff now resurfaces and stuff that like in our class, in apologetics class, like stuff that I'm like, this is interesting because I just taught on this for the last couple of years, and he's asking me like, is there even like, how do you even know there's such a thing as truth, which is a big deal in our culture today. And I'd love to circle that back to that later as well. But how do you know there's even such a thing as truth? Like, what is truth? Like, he's telling me that there are people who, they get back from their missions, or they stand in front of our Mormon churches and they tell us, it's my testimony that Jesus Christ is real and that I know him. But he's like, do you? Because like, we're all supposed to say that, and so in their case, it became kind of cultish. And so he's like, how do you even know any of this is real? And so we started talking, and I brought a book by Dr. Frank Turk. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. That's the one I recommend to everyone who is just looking for some more. It's like 400 pages, but it's a very, very straightforward read. It's pretty simple to understand. And so I brought it to him, and he actually asked to borrow it himself, which was awesome. He ended up reading that thing in like 2 or 3 weeks, and he brought it back. I actually didn't see him after this. He brought it back when I wasn't home and left it on my doorstep. But conversation went really, really well. And the guy who was sitting next to him was just kind of like imagine like you're brand new to the field. like you just got sent out with this older, like more experienced Mormon missionary who is now telling this Christian guy that he's an atheist. Like, what is going on, And so this guy, like, he's this young kid. Like, he just sat there for, I think this was like 1.5 to 3-ish hours, somewhere between there. And he just sat, like, I didn't even finish my food. Like, we just kind of talked. And he sat through all of that. And then towards the end, I'm like, listen, man, like, I've just answered all your questions about Christianity, like all of your objections. Like, look, if you're going to look for God, and the thing with Mormonism is you have to let them know that you're not trying to steal their faith. You're trying to guide them to a deeper faith.
I think that is a big point, is to not deconstruct someone's personal testimony. That's actually really huge.
Because that becomes the truest thing about them to them, And so you're saying like, look, like, I appreciate your character, like I appreciate your commitment, and I think it's misdirected, and I just want to show you something deeper. Basically, the conversation ended in a way where I had to tell him, like, if you're looking for God, I love the fact that you're looking for God with your mind. Like, I love that. But if you're looking for an actual being that exists, and that we believe actually communicates with us, it wouldn't hurt to pray. It wouldn't hurt to ask him to reveal himself to you while you look for him with your mind, Worst case, you don't get a response. Best case, you do, And he's like, actually, Alex, I did. I kind of guided him. Like, I'm like, this is kind of the kind of prayer that I'm talking about. And I gave him like a layout, just like verbally, just like, like what you should say to God if you're looking for him. And he's like, that's basically what I prayed. And then you texted me maybe 10, 15 minutes later. And I haven't talked to him for months. And so I'm like, oh. So basically, like, he's like, that's why we're here. Like, usually a Mormon person won't, like, especially if he's an elder who's finishing up his missionary, like, they won't reach out to a Christian and be like, can you help me fix my faith? You know what I mean? Like, and he's like, that's why we came. So we're doing things oftentimes for months. Like in apologetics, you can do things for a while. You can have one conversation with a person and never see them again. That's what Paul talks about. I think one of the things when he says, make the most of every opportunity, you know what I mean? And so like in this case, my opportunity was months, and I thought I wasn't seeing any fruit. I started getting a little discouraged inside. I'm like, well, at least it was good practice for me, whatever. But what I didn't know was that the Spirit was actually working in deeper ways than I imagined. And so, I'm not sure how we got here, but that's that's something
it's important. I think a good point to bring up is when it comes to friendship, because I had a conversation with someone last night about friendship. Are you willing to, or do you actually, not are you willing, but do you actually desire to be someone's friend, even when they're not a believer? And if they don't become a believer immediately, are you still okay with being their friends? Yeah. And even if it's 3 years, are you still willing to be their friend and continue to be there next to them and still love them? Or are we being someone's friend simply to see them converted? Yeah. Which is a whole nother thing. Yeah. And, I think that's what, especially non-believers, what they want from us is that we're wanting to be their friend, somebody to be their friend, and that they're actually okay with changing or converting or being transformed if it's a natural aspect of the relationship. Yeah. But if it's not, then they don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a fine line to walk sometimes, because we get excited about what we believe and we want people to believe it. But I think you're right. Like, it should stem from a genuine place of love. Like the reason that I want you to be saved, aside from the fact that I believe you're a human that deserves, or not, I don't know how to word this, that you're a human who I think should be saved. I don't know. Is because I love you and I want to be your friend. And so because I love you, I'm going to tell you what I think is true. And I expect you to do the same. Like, regardless of what you believe, because you love me and you're my friend, you should tell me what you think is most important. You know what I mean? I have friends that I grew up with since Pokemon cards who are not Christians, you know, and they know where I stand on everything. And they don't really have any interest in living a Christian lifestyle.
On Pokemon cards, they know where you stand on that.
No. Yeah, they'll no. That's funny. And the thing is, like, they will. I've had them reach out to me when they encounter something in life that is like a pretty serious situation and ask me to pray. You know what I mean? And they will basically, you know, they'll reach out to me and they'll be like, "Hey, Alex, like, this is what's going on. Could you pray for me? Could you do this or that?" And sometimes I'll even, be asked for advice, for spiritual advice from someone who's not a Christian. And that's all good. Like, they know that they have someone in their life who, when they're ready, they can come to. Mm-hmm. And I've actually had conversations with people where they began by thinking that Christianity in general is dumb, basically. And they've come to a point where they're like, okay, when I'm ready, like, yeah, I'll give you a call. Like it's...
And that's a big aspect too. I know plenty of people who are non-believers will listen to a TED Talk, will listen to any sort of speech, motivational saying, and as long as it's not explicitly labeled something, but if it's just phrased out, they'll receive it gladly to change their life or to put inside of them. And I think the main thing is, like, people see you as a source when they see that you're steady, when they see that there's joy, and ultimately every single person is seeking an answer to their problem. Mm-hmm. And so that's huge. Like, cause people are willing to go to, people who have different worldviews, different religions, and they're willing to take in that, whatever word they have to give, whatever their testimony is. Yeah. And they're willing to receive it because ultimately people want to they want to change their lives. Yeah. They want to see a difference in it. And I think the biggest number one thing is anxiety and depression.
Oh yeah. Yeah. In our society, people are looking for hope. I met a guy from Iran who is a Christian, and this was a few years ago, and he's a civil engineer in downtown Portland. He's been here for a while, but he was saying, like, when we were leaving Iran, a lot of people were leaving, not leaving, but a lot of people were converting to Christianity from Islam. And he's like, and really the reason he gave me was because they're looking for hope. He's like, they see where they are in life. They see where their current worldview has gotten them, and they're just looking for hope somewhere else, And so sometimes that's what people are drawn to. And if we live with a hope, then they want to ask us for the hope that's within us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It feels like it's a good balance of having, like, both kind of, when you're preaching to people off the street, like Mormons and stuff, you can be a lot more intentional with it, the way you have conversation, where it's like, I'm not always seeing you. So it's, a little bit more intentional with the conversations you have, taking every opportunity you can. When it comes to friends, I feel like when you have friends that are unbelievers, it almost keeps you in check on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. Because it seems like they're even kind of on standby, just waiting for you to mess up. Yeah. Where it's kind of like, we'll see. It's like,
even subconsciously.
Yeah. Because it's like, oh, like, I found this hope. I believe in Jesus. Like, this is what satisfies me. This is what my heart beats for. This is what I'm about. And like, I know the real you. Like, we hung out. Like, I know you.
And the thing is, like, we're not perfect either. Like, we're gonna make mistakes. Everyone does. The thing is, like if that happens in a relationship, in a friendship, we should own it. Like, we should just be like, you know what? Like, I did that. Like, I shouldn't have done that. You were there with me. Like, like, I know you don't care, but, like, I feel like that was not in keeping with what I believe, and I'm going to try to do better next time. Like, if we just own it, like, it becomes not like a thing. It just becomes like, then you're showing your character and integrity in the hard times,
Well, I think one good point is, from a very early age, we feel a natural inclination to fake things or to pretend or to cover up. And so the natural response of anyone from the world is that, oh, like, they're just faking it or pretending. just like I am, because I'm pretending.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I know earnestly that throughout my life before being a believer, and even through a portion of being a believer, that I faked it and that I pretended, and that was just a natural response from like human condition, right? To just fake and pretend.
Yeah.
And we still see some of that even throughout the church, but that is like the natural response. So like what people outside of our circles want to see is they're waiting and waiting. Some people will wait patiently to know for sure that you're not faking it and not pretending.
Yeah.
And so that's why our life as a testimony is because people are testing the validity of what we're preaching or what we're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. By our life.
Because I would actually want to believe, and I think that this is true, that people are open to hearing the gospel. People are open to being encouraged, but oftentimes they just don't trust the validity or believe that it's real. And so the true test is to prove that we're real.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes the defense of our faith is ourself.
Yeah. Oftentimes that's the first level.
Yeah.
like if they don't like you, they're not going to want to hear what you have to say.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I want to actually hear like a little quick story time from Alex. I want to hear about what because this is going to be, because I think for a lot of people, we've never actually truly given an apologia, right? Or a defense. And so I would love to hear your first time giving an apology to somebody and what that was like. I think just for the sake of people to hear, and then we can even transition over to like maybe a few years down the road, and like what, like this is where he started. Now look where he is now.
It's a process. It really is. At first you get really excited when you start learning this stuff. You're just like looking for people to argue with and tear down. And the problem is we forget that like there's a difference between winning arguments and winning hearts. And like we're called to win arguments. And we're actually called to tear down, I forget the exact verse, but basically, demolish arguments and make every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. So when we're focused on winning arguments only, we miss the point because we're not doing it out of love. And so our job is to it is to win arguments, but it's also to win hearts. And so like, as we do it out of love, we present the apologia in the way that it's supposed to be. But my first couple times, like you get really excited and you're just looking for people to argue and tear down. So there was one example that I can think of. It was really early on, and I was actually talking to a guy about the Trinity, and it ended up just being like this horrible, horrible evening where we were just kind of like yelling over each other, like not even yelling, just like talking over each other. At one point, I'm like, let me get 10 seconds. Let me get 10 seconds for the gospel. He's like, okay, he's counting down, and I'm trying, like, it got pretty bad. Like, it was, not proud of that. But the thing is, like, there is a way to approach conversations with grace, and there's even logical steps that we can talk about later as well that keeps you focused in a conversation with someone who disagrees with you. That is really important. And the thing is, I didn't care about like this person's actual salvation as much as I did about me, destroying them or whatever you want to call it, and that's counterproductive. Like when you do that to people, you're actually like pushing them away. There's also another way to push people away though, and that's with not taking their questions seriously. That's how I was pushed away. And that's when someone asks you a question and you don't think that it's important enough. And so like, when I was struggling with stuff before I walked away, I asked someone a question. I'm like, hey, like, have you ever thought about like, what if like God actually isn't there? Like we all think he is, but like, what if legitimately like there is no such thing as God in this universe? And the thing that I got in response from this individual was, dude, that's stupid. Like you have to be stupid to be an atheist. Like, come on, bro. Like, why would you do that? And of course I didn't continue asking him questions. Of course I didn't open up anymore. Instead, it drove me deeper into my skepticism and my doubt. And this was by a Christian, And so like, this is the kind of stuff that we are to avoid. We're supposed to, like Jude tells us to be merciful to those who doubt, So we're supposed to be able to demolish arguments, win minds, and win hearts, and allow the Holy Spirit to give the growth. You know what I mean? And so that's our call. It's not just one or the other, it's both. And so when we leave our brain at the door, and all we do is make relationships and friendships, but we have no idea how to communicate about truth, we're lacking. Like, it's good. It's really good. Like, I would rather be a person who isn't good at apologetics but good at relationships than a person who is great at apologetics but pushes all relationships away.
Right.
Because at least I can be somewhat of an influence with my life. But what I'm talking about is both. Like, we have to have both.
Yeah. That's such a good point. I remember my first time evangelizing. We were, fresh Bible school students, all passionate. We go in, come across some atheist guy, and this dude knows the Bible better than us, and he's throwing out scripture, and we're fact checking it all, like he's accurate. And then he starts asking us all these questions, and we're like trying to look it up in the Bible. He's like, "Really, you guys are here evangelizing? You don't even know your own Bible?" And it was like bad.
Wow.
But the thing is, that motivated me, because that was my first experience.
Yeah.
I was like, "Are you kidding me?" That motivated me to go and learn all the questions, find answers. That's when they approached us, our ear, like, "Hey, do you guys want to learn how to defend your faith?" We're like, "Heck yeah!" So they brought you in to teach us.
Yeah.
So that's why it made us passionate, because we had that failure or that experience that actually made us passionate to, okay, we need to find these questions, find the answers. And it was that process of, okay, I need to learn it for myself. And I believe we did have that mindset of like, okay, we just need to go like destroy these people in argument. And over time, you do learn that, okay, maybe it motivated us to learn it for ourselves. And then over time, you learn that, it should be more of a relational aspect. I should be able to answer these questions in such a practical way, but at the same time, that not be the focus. But okay, how can I be more relational? How can I win, like you said, not an argument, but their heart?
Yeah.
And how do we step into that? So I love that there's that balance. And the thing is, so many people are scared to go and evangelize because they're afraid of failure or I can't talk. But you should just go for it, because that'll only motivate you, right? Like that's what actually motivated us. And now okay, this is what I should look into. This is it actually makes it that much more exciting.
Yeah, you'll learn what you don't know. The thing is about like evangelism is there's so many different ways to do it. Like apologetics and evangelism is kind of like just part of your lifestyle. Like I mean, you could go out into the street and you can find someone and you can talk to them, or you could do it at work, right?
And I think that's where it actually gets a little different, because when you work with someone,
you're good.
Go in there. But I think one reason why we find it difficult to give apology or evangelize in our workplace is because we see them every day.
Yeah.
I think the hardest place for me to ever evangelize, which was very difficult, was in high school, because you see everybody every day.
Yeah.
And so it was intimidating. It truly was. It was there, but there was this one kid who I would evangelize to every day. He was Muslim, and I did it for like every single day. But I think more like that then during that time, I was probably more pestering than like actually evangelizing. I was probably just bugging him.
Did you
more
convert yet?
DJ, are you ready? Are you ready yet? Are you ready now? And so I think that's the hard part. But I think when we approach everything with love and grace and understanding the Lord's timing too, and understanding like the invisible battle that's going on within somebody, which is like on a soul level in regards to depression, anxiety, Holy Spirit, like our internal arguments, which are typically not a logical argument. Like I think typically the reason why we're not open to the gospel is not because of a logical disagreement. It's actually an internal argument of like abuse, of fear, of generational curse. It's usually actually something very spiritual.
Yeah. Or wanting to be your own God, functionally. Yeah, that's very true. Okay, two things. You just brought up two things. Okay, so I'll respond to the second one first, and I'll dive into the first. So the second one, people, a lot of times it's not even logical. That's so true, because when you talk to people, a lot of times their logical reasons are a barrier and really a fence that they've built up to keep you out of their emotional ones. And the way that anyone comes to whatever that is they believe is a combination of a bunch of things. It's your influence, your upbringing, your logical reasons, your emotions, your experiences. All of these things formulate what you believe. That none of those things mean that what you believe is wrong. So you can, like, a guy high on crack could give me directions to this office, and he could still be correct. It doesn't matter where I got the information from. That's just part of logic. But the thing is, we get all of our information from a plethora of areas. And gosh, now I forgot what the second thing was. So basically, we get information from.
It happens, bro.
Yeah, from a lot of. I get excited from a lot of different areas. And what were you saying? The second thing you said.
Bro, it happens. We can just move on.
No. This was something. This was something. Okay, so. All right. Well, I'll just respond to the first thing. Maybe the second thing will come around. So. What you just said, and maybe this will like set someone free. Like what you just said was that a lot of times what keeps us from evangelizing at work is because we see them every day and we work with them. We go to school with them. We're somewhere with them. And the thing is, I think that comes with a presupposition that evangelizing has to look a certain way. And that if it doesn't work, they will see us either as less, they will respect us less, it will be awkward the next day. Something will come up that is not what we intended and that will make us look bad. Yeah. But the thing is and then that draws us into self-reflection, which oftentimes ends up in condemnation. Because what happens is, and I've had this, is like, why don't I want to go preach on the street? Well, a lot of times, like, because maybe I'm scared what people will think of me. And then I start thinking, wow, I'm ashamed of Christ. That means Christ is going to be ashamed of me, that whole thing. And so like, being ashamed of God is not a good thing. But I think a lot of times, like, it's that presupposition of like, they will see me as weird because I see evangelism as X, Y, and Z. What I'm trying to get at is evangelism doesn't have to be X, Y, and Z. There's many more letters in the alphabet. Like if you're working at your job, like I had people, I worked with a lady, she was almost retired, atheist, hardcore atheist. She knew what I believed, and I became her and I became the closest friends at work because I was so personable with her, and that like I didn't see her as less or different.
You don't see her as an objective or a task.
No, I don't. And she looks at me and she respects me completely. Like, and then like we'll sometimes talk about like even politics, like making fun of the same people in politics, even though like we land differently, very differently on political things. I would join her in making fun of the candidates that I would support. Because I don't care. Like, it's just politics. Like, in our world, we like demonize so much. And so, like, because it's funny. Like, I'll make fun of myself if I have to, Like, if I do something funny, it's funny. And so, like, I made this connection with her. And she respected me, I think, more for it because I didn't hide it. A lot of times, like, when we're at work, we think that, like, evangelizing means we have to come up and say, hey, listen, brother, sister, or friend, not brother, sister yet. That's our objective, right? We come up, we say, hey, listen, friend.
You uncircumcised Philistine.
No.
Hear the gospel.
No, a lot of times we come. Okay, yeah, this is live. No, that was too good. A lot of times we come up and we're thinking like, okay, this is what evangelism looks like. Like if it's my boss, for example, like how hard is it to come up to your boss and be like, where will you go when you die today? Like if you were to die tomorrow, you will burn in hell for all eternity. He's going to be like, bro, do you have the report I asked you for yesterday? Like it's a completely different, but there's another way.
If you don't submit these documents by tomorrow,
you will be fired.
Do you know that?
And then your response should be, your fire is a lot. No, okay, whatever. So basically what I'm getting at is like apologetics, evangelism, like it's for everybody. And it can be done anywhere you go. Like it's not so like instead of doing the whole if you were to die tonight thing, which sometimes I agree is necessary. It
Lord's
depends
timing.
On the conversation.
Lord's timing.
Yeah, timing. And so the thing is like with your boss, you could model what it means to, do things with character. Like if you mess up at work, tell your boss you messed up at work without hiding it if that's what's required. You know what I mean? Like if you're late, don't make stuff up. Like stuff like that, like little details will already begin to build your character. And eventually in a conversation, he might want to know or she might want to know what you believe, or you might have a moment where you get to share. But the thing is like, you're still yourself. And tomorrow when you come back, you won't have to stare him in the face and him staring you in the face and being like, I can't believe you tried to make me pray the Lord's Prayer yesterday. Like that's not what happened because like it's a different approach. And so I think a lot of times the reason that we don't evangelize or we don't do apologetics or we don't engage with the culture around us on a daily basis is because we have a specific view of what that should look like and then a specific view what that looks like when it fails. And we always think that it's going to fail.
We need to break the mold.
Yeah.
We need to break it.
We need to be ourselves.
Well, that's first. We got to be ourselves because no, again, people don't want to talk to someone who's fake.
Yeah.
Right? That's the first thing. Like, don't be fake.
Yeah.
Like, the second thing is when honor steps on into like the conversation, automatically it changes. It's a totally different conversation when there's honor in the room. And like when I can honor somebody thoroughly throughout the entire conversation, by like, no, I honor your opinion. Like I thank you for sharing that. Like showing appreciation towards someone when they open up their heart and say, well, this is what I believe. Whenever someone says this is what I believe, they're opening up their soul to what it's latched onto, which may be something totally different than what we believe. Yeah. But if we disregard that and say, yeah, I don't honor your opinion, you're totally wrong, we need to throw you in an insane asylum, how are they going to hear anything you said?
Exactly. And that I was on both sides of that. Yeah.
So I've been there.
Yeah, right? I know what that feels like. It's horrible. And like, I've had conversations with people where once you strip away all their objections that you do so carefully, you never brush them off. A lot of times when someone has an objection for me against Christianity, I'll rephrase the objection back to them in a way that makes it harder for me on purpose. So like if they tell me something like they have a problem with Christianity, problem A, I'll be like, I see your point. Here, actually, let me help you. Like A squared. Like this is even worse than and what that does is it builds credibility in their eyes because they're like, oh, you care, you understand, and you actually want to address what I'm asking, not just brush it off. And so once I've done that before, where once I've like, moved past the objections, then you get to the hard issue. And I've had people admit to me that it's in the end the hard issue. And they wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been literally hours of these kinds of conversations. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times we just have to be really patient. We have to honor the person enough, respect the person enough to actually care, and to hear them out what they have to say. Another thing that happened pretty recently actually is someone sent me a contact info to a person. Someone I know was reading a Bible in the coffee shop, and someone came up to them and they're like, hey, I see you're actually pretty serious about this Bible thing. I'm not a believer anymore. And they told him that. And the reason that I teach what I teach and that like I'm passionate about this is because I want people to be able to have these conversations themselves. But I understand if they feel like overwhelmed. So in this case, they contacted me and they passed their information along to me. I reached out to this individual. We met at a coffee shop and we talked for a while. So I've never seen this person before, right? So first time introducing. So I'm like, listen, like the fact that you're able to come up to my friend and ask him about a Bible in a place where he probably wasn't alone, he was probably with his buddies, like that tells me a lot about you. And I told him like I respect that. Like that takes real courage. And I told him it takes real courage because like if you're struggling, what are the chances you're going to come up to a stranger who is actually a lot younger than you and ask them why they believe what they believe? You know what I mean? Like you're an older guy, like he has a daughter and a wife, like, and his concern is like, gosh, I want to make sure I'm not wrong about God because like, I don't want to drag my daughter to hell with me, because this is the way I'm going to raise her. And so we ended up talking for a while. And at the end, your testimony does matter. But in this case, I left it out and because I wanted to approach things from like a perspective of like, I want to hear you out. I want to answer your questions and I want to see where we can go from here. Mm-hmm. In the end, he actually thanked me before we left. He's like, hey, like, thank you so much for like not just telling me your testimony and expecting that to convert me, And he's like, I really appreciate that, And so like he got a conversation out of someone who didn't undermine his questions. I tried not to like talk over him or not pay attention when he was talking, but instead like I heard him out and then I like things that you don't know, you can admit that you don't know and that you'll look into them. Like a lot of times like Christians are scared to engage in apologetics because they think that like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get destroyed. You're only going to get destroyed if you're approaching it like a combat session. Like you don't get destroyed unless you're fighting. Right. So if you're concerned about getting destroyed, you're not there to learn. You're not there to evangelize. You're not there to love. Right. All you're trying to do is destroy instead of winning the mind and the heart. Instead, you're just. And so that's a good indicator. Like if I'm worried about this guy destroying me right now, check my heart. Like, why am I talking to this person at all? Like, because the thing is, if they tell you something that you don't know the answer to, you telling them you don't know actually builds your credibility in their eyes, especially if you say, can I follow up with you? And then you do. And so now you have a relationship, a mutual relationship. And they both know, like, it's not like you didn't know why I was there. I'm like, I don't expect you to convert right now. I'm pretty sure I even told him that. Like, I don't expect you to convert right now. I'm just here to like be here for you. Like, I want to talk to you, And so like people see that. because we can hide things, but people can see through them. You know what I mean? And we shouldn't be hiding anything at all, especially as Christians, like blank slate, like clear slate. Every time, we're talking to someone and they ask us for our motivation, just tell them. Like, it'll bring more respect to you, because even people of like other worldviews, especially like people of Muslim worldview, like they're going to respect you more when you admit to the fact that you want them to convert, because like they actually want the same for you, and so that is another connecting point to build a relationship on.
Yeah, and what most people will notice, especially when this begins to be your intention of, seeing, like you said, Aleph, you said it's not you're deconstructing them, but you're just leading them on and leading their motivation to something deeper, right? Because you've tasted and you've seen how real this is, because you've tried out so many different things.
Yeah.
And what most people will tell you is that it seems like you grow even more personally when you begin to, share with others. Like when you're real, and where, like you said, you're not going into this like it's combat. Like I'm being real with myself. It's like, this is just my heartbeat. This is what transformed my life. And I just want you to taste and see of what I have. So yeah, there's that testimony aspect. And yet it's something that continually is growing me and stretching me. And I really love how you said that. So I just flew out of my head.
That's true. It's continuing stretching you, growing you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not trying to continue fighting them for it, but where you're having that real, like, I'm growing in this too still. Like, it's a constant transformation. And like you said, your life is what preaches. And so especially like when we're talking about our friends, right?
Yeah.
They're constantly looking at you like, okay, like 1 year passed, 2 years passed, like, and they see that you're still continually growing, where it's not like, oh, he got saved, but then he went right back to what he was doing.
Yeah.
This is something that I think it always comes down to my life transforming every single day personally. If it's real and genuine for me, I'm constantly growing. I'm constantly transforming. I'm being real with myself. I'm still growing.
Yeah.
And they begin to see that it's real for you, and you're honest with them. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know all the answers. Like you said, well, let me get back to you. I don't know that answer too, but that's a good question. We can learn it together.
Yeah.
When it becomes real to you, it's not combat. It's like, hey, let's grow this together. But this is something that worked for me, and I believe it's something that will obviously work for you too, right?
Yeah.
This is what will satisfy. It's relationship isn't, oh, I'm perfect. It's actually like, hey, like we're in this together. Yeah.
And a quick note on that. A lot of times, like, I like that. Yeah. A quick note. A lot of times we, at least myself, sometimes I'll feel like I am getting a little bit too logical and like too answery with people, for lack of a better word. And I don't want to look like I'm like super like, educated to someone who's just asking questions. And so I've noticed, and I think this is a flaw, I've noticed where like I'll actually kind of almost demean myself a little bit. I'll just be like, oh man, like I'm always like doing this or that. Like even like with like a apologetics type of conversation, like, oh man, like I wish I knew more about this. I don't know. But like really, like I don't think that's a good thing to do. That's just like something that I'm learning not to do anymore. Like there's a way, because I'm scared of looking prideful.
You don't want to look self-righteous.
Yeah, or self-righteous. Like because my concern is like looking like a know-it-all in like for example, like a philosophy conversation to someone who like, I don't want to look like a know-it-all, but then I swing the pendulum a little bit too far to the other side and almost play dumb. You know what I mean? And that's not something we should be doing either. Like we should be operating out of love. And people really like, this is a common phrase, but it's so true. Like people don't need to know how much you know until they know how much you care. You know what I mean? Like one time we were in a philosophy debate setting, and it was like an open dialogue, open forum type of thing. And there was this guy there. He's an atheist, hardcore atheist, and he's a lawyer, and he has 2 kids. He's a Chinese guy, awesome guy. We made a friend, both my wife and I. He ended up coming to an apologetics event later. He knew some of the guys there, and it was amazing. But so we were talking for a while, and this event started, I think at like 8:30. We might have got there around there. And most people left, and it was like me, my wife, Christina, the guy who was hosting it, and then 3 other non-believers. And one of the non-believers was this Chinese friend of mine. And we were talking to him for probably about, I think it was about 2 a.m. So it was like, it just went on. And how this ended up going about was he has some real reservations towards the idea of the existence of God. In that, like when his sister stepped away from the faith, I think they grew up Baptist. When his sister stepped away from the faith, his parents basically like denied her. Like they were just like, oh well, I guess she's going to hell, and we have to live with it. Like we're gonna keep serving God, and she can make her own choice. And for him, that was like, how could you just give up on someone so fast? And so he has all this hurt and pain, and he has a really serious problem with the existence of hell, for example. And so we ended up talking through the night, and it was interesting because like he would ask a question. And I would address the question from a very logical and philosophical way, and then my wife would bump in with more of a practical, like, well, not like more of like an emotional, in the best sense of the word, application. Like, hey, like, you know, why do you think that this is bugging you so much? And grown man, like this lawyer is sitting there and he's just thinking about everything we're talking about. He ended up reaching out to me and he wanted me to meet him again. And so we met up, and we met up at like a children's play thing. It was like his son's friend's birthday, and it was like an hour before everyone got there. So we met up, and he ended up just like asking me a bunch of questions. I'm like half his age, maybe a little less than half. But you know, like when people see that you actually care, and they see that like you're taking their questions seriously, you're respecting them, you're honoring their time, you're honoring their interest, you're honoring their character, they want to know more. And oftentimes, like they'll want to follow up, because the thing is, in a forum like what we were in, there's people listening, like there's people around, and so maybe he felt like he couldn't, like it was a little bit too confrontational, and so he wanted just me and him at a children's thing, like across a table, and we just chatted for a while. You know, like people once they know that you actually care, then they want to start knowing how much you know or what you know, and
I think just to wrap it up, like, to close this off, I think what we could take away from all this is not to tailor how we approach a conversation apologetically or evangelistically, however we approach a conversation, and whatever like the tone of it is, that we would actually tailor it for the person we're talking to, because each person is individualistically like different. Like we're all very diverse. We're created differently. And if we have that same understanding of how God created us, that we're all unique and how he designed us, then we should approach every single conversation differently. And we should actually be very attentive, very respectful, based on the person we're speaking to. And that first, we should be patient. And the first desire we should have is, and ask ourselves is, do we want this to be a long-term relationship? Am I in this just for an hour, or am I in this for a relationship that could last a lifetime? Because most of the times, like why I stuck in the system of a church was because of relationship, was because I got stuck in a group of people, and that's what kept me there. I would almost guarantee that if it wasn't first for the relationship and community that I was placed in, then I wouldn't be in church. It would have been harder for me. Maybe the route I took in life might be different, but I know that in all of those people, Christ was in them. And so the community and like the relational aspect is super important. And so I know that if you stick with somebody throughout their life and you hold fast to them and you're like, I'm going to put you first, I'm going to be with you, I value you as a person, no matter what you believe. And if we can just stay friends, I guarantee that if we live the life of Christ, they'll be convinced that within their lifetime, they'll be convinced through our life, based on our actions, based on what we've done, based on our testimonies, based on the miracles that happen in our life, they will be convinced. Like if we're willing to actually stick it through and allow these people to come in our life, and we don't put a time limit on it and say like, hey, I'm going to give you 2 hours, and if you don't get saved in these 2 hours, I'm sorry, my life's busy, I need to go. And we overcomplicate it too. We think like if we make it a long-term relationship, that it's like I have to be with them every week, and that's not the case. Like it could be a couple times a year, but having them be a reminder in your life and coming back to them at the end of the day and being like, hey, how are you doing? Like continuing on that relationship of like giving in and take them out to lunch. And I've noticed that like people in high school, they're reaching out like, it would have been such a waste to keep high school closed off and been like, well, that's a thing in the past. Like, goodbye, guys. But like leaving it open ended, and like, I mean, I don't like I care what they believe, but at the same time, I don't care what they believe. I care enough about them that regardless of what they believe or where they're at in life, what they do, what they think, like I honor them as a person. God created them. They have a purpose. They have a destiny. They have gifts. They have talents. Yeah. They have a family. They're going to have a future family, and they're going to make an impact on the world and on people. And so
they have influence, whether good or bad.
Yeah. I'm going to let my life be the testimony that will change someone, whether it's in a year or in 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's a much more approachable concept when we look at it that way, is like, there is not a time limit. Obviously we want to do it before someone's time on earth is over, but
you like make the most of every opportunity.
We have the greatest helper, which is the Holy Spirit. And I guarantee you that if we have faith, the Holy Spirit will come. He'll intercede. He'll help. He'll speed the process up. The moments will be presented. And if you have a relationship with someone, they're always going to reach out to you.
And you know, like loving your neighbor like you love yourself, like how would you, like now knowing what you know and believing what you believe, how would you have wanted your believing neighbor, if you were the atheist, how would you have wanted him to love you? You know, like would you have wanted him to, how would you have felt if he gave up on you after 2 weeks? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah, we have to be patient with those.
Oh, he didn't really care. He was just kind of like, it was just a strategy.
Yeah, he just left some Bible booklets on my front door and ran away. Guys. You know, like how do you, like, what does loving your neighbor like you love yourself mean to you? You know, and like in conclusion, like I think like people, I really want to encourage people that apologetics, evangelism, really apologetics is just the fancy word for being able to explain what you believe, being open to doing so. I think like we need to get this through our heads that it's easier than we think. We don't have to get PhDs in it in order to do it. You know what I mean? Like we just be yourself. It's for everybody. If you're a believer, you're called to do it. Like, and so it's for everybody. Be yourself. And when you approach people, when people approach you, the people you bump shoulders with, like just be an example, be a light in the darkness, be someone who's able to hear them out and answer their questions, and then answer the questioner behind the question as well, because there are layers of questions oftentimes, but then there's the person asking the question in the background. And a lot of times you won't get to the questioner until you get through the questions with grace and with truth.
Well, facts. Thank you so much, Alex.
Of course. Thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yeah, we love you.
Love you too, bro.
You say we love you?
You want to say
I love you.
I love you.
We love you.
Love
for
you too,
a long
guys.
time.
Yeah. Boys for life.
You're boys for life. You're a good guy. Okay. Don't let anyone ever tell you differently. Yeah.
This is what you guys mean by grilling.
I definitely don't care what they say about you.
Good.
Bro,
good. You shouldn't care.
You're a good guy. Your son, cutest thing of life.
Oh, I know.
The treasure of my heart.
I'm so thankful. Whoa.
Yeah, he's my treasure. Until I have a kid, he's my treasure.
Wow.
So
okay. Good to know. We got a babysitter.
Oh, okay. Let's not go there, but
wrap up.
Wrap it up. Yeah, well, thank you. I believe we'll do it again, because I feel like there's at least one more part that we have to get into. To kind of wrap up the conversation.
Oh yeah. I'd love to get a little more technical. If some of your listeners have some like hardcore questions, we could get into that too.
I think that we should just maybe we should even like, not that we wrap up this relationship, that like after this we're just done. Like, sorry, bro. Like,
yeah,
we're done. But I think in the sense that we should just go live and we should just do a Q&A.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Ask some hard questions.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much, bro.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Love you.
Love you.